would like now to introduce Ciaron O'Reilly, who doesn't need any introductions from me. He's been camping out here for months in support of Julian Assange. He's been defending this cause with his body in the streets of London and outside Belmarsh. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about empathy and solidarity as a friend of Julian's and as a former prisoner of the United States, where I served 13 months for disabling a B-52 bomber on the eve of the First Gulf War. Other B-52s from that upstate New York base were deployed to England, and they dropped napalm, cluster bombs and fuel air explosives on the people of Iraq. And meeting Neil from Veterans for Peace, who was as an 18-year-old deployed to that war, and knowing Julian's resistance as a 17-year-old hacker before he became a publisher and a journalist, before he found his vocation, he was an activist. Some people grow up, others don't. I still remain an activist. And the releasing of the wankworm in the Pentagon computer system. And I'd really encourage people to find the Australian movie Underground, because I think the short circuit in England and during this campaign is one of empathy. And people just switch off to the name Julian Assange. I was saying to John the other day, I got to spend a day with John on his 75th birthday. That when you say Julian's name, it's like mentioning the name Gollum from Lord of the Rings, you know. And I thought of other people I've known in my life who are like that. And it's very much the Aboriginal people in Australia that any kind of, they're defined out of existence. And I think of the refugees and Nauru and the offshore gulags. And I met Patrick Maguire, who's a 14-year-old who was dragged from his bed by the British Special Branch, and his family was sent to prison with the Guildford Four. And I knew Jerry Conlon. His father came over here to find him a lawyer, and he died in one of these prisons. And if you raised any of those names, the switch off, the short circuit. And I think one thing you can say about both Chelsea Manning, having met Chelsea's mother and uncles and aunts up in Wales, and Julian Assange, is they are people of empathy and solidarity. And you can clearly see that. You can clearly see that because Julian Assange could be a multi-millionaire poolside in Silicon Valley today and not in this prison. And the reason he's in this prison and not poolside in Silicon Valley raking it up is because he chose to align himself with the poor and the bombed and the exploited. And you know, and you look at Chelsea's family and values she was raised with as well, and you find those kind of themes as there as well. The second reason you know that Julian Assange is a person of courage and empathy and solidarity is that Edward Snowden is not in chains today. And The Guardian left Edward Snowden in Hong Kong, and it was Sarah and Julian that rescued Edward Snowden. And at great risk to his own liberty. And that's why you can clearly see that. Now, I've served time in about 10 prisons, 5 maximum security prisons in the United States, Ireland and Australia. It's become an occupational hazard. And the thing about prison, as I'm sure many of you know, is that it's designed to tell you day after day that you are forgotten, that no one cares, to recant, to flip over. And the only anti-venom you have to that is the solidarity, your own spirituality, your own sense of self, and the solidarity of others. And I think it's very significant whenever people can gather here to do that, because they can hear us across the wall. Families on their family visits today will be telling their families that we're out here, and word just spreads like wildfire in a prison. And the people who run prisons are quite cowardly. They run a totalitarian, self-referential institution. This is a pocket of fascism in liberal democracy, in my experience in prison. I've been in prison 3 times when people have been killed, and there was hardly any inquiry into that at all. And so the more solidarity you have on the outside, the safer it is for the prisoner, not only in terms of their physical health, but their mental health as well. And the other thing I said last night that struck me about Julian especially, and also Chelsea, is that I've witnessed for 9 years visiting Julian in the embassy. I remember being at his 40th birthday party, and he's now 49, a slow motion crucifixion of Julian Assange, a concerted attack on his mental and physical health and his character by the British state. But that context is in the slow motion crucifixion of Iraq, of Syria, of Yemen, of the Middle East, which WikiLeaks has exposed. And that's what I've seen in the deterioration. And the only anti-venom you have the only health-giving thing is your own spirituality and your own solidarity. But these are people who've chosen a way of life these are people who are very much like us, who are suffering very much like them. Now we're from most of us are from the centre of empire, whether it's England or Australia or the United States. And we're afforded this bubble that we can go through this world and just keep our head down and ignore what our militaries are doing throughout the world and live in this kind of dual reality. And Chelsea and Julian have stepped out in different ways. One was within the military, one was a civilian. And they've become people very much like us, who are suffering very much like them, the other. And I think it's great to be in the vicinity of Julian Assange today. It's great to be sharing this point of history with his father, with him, with Chelsea Manning, with Edward Snowden, with Jeremy Hammond and others. Thank you.
Well done.